live from the new sports betting capital of the world.
You might be from Texas, but I'm from New Jersey.
Benny Ricciardi is here to break down the day's betting board for you.
Let's go, Jim. Go!
Taking a first look at the day's bets, it's time for the FTN Betting Show.
To the FTN Bets Cast for Monday, July 25th here at FTN Bets, sponsored by our friends over at Sleeper. Sleeper is the fastest growing fantasy platform today with millions of players, and now you can win on Sleeper by playing their new over-under game as well. It's super easy to play. So first, in any sport, you're going to choose two or more players that you like, and you're going to pick whether they're going to go over or under their listed total. So for example, tonight in baseball, it could be the number of hits somebody's going to get, the number of runs they score, maybe the number of strikeouts that a pitcher has. And then you're going to choose the amount of money you want to enter into the contest. And if you pick correctly, you win anywhere from 2 times your money all the way up to 20 times your money if you go 5 out of 5 and get them all right. But the main reason I'm excited about this over-under game on Sleeper, it's the only app that has a built-in group chat where you can play with all your buddies. You can see what I'm playing. I can see what you're playing. We could all see what the guy who won 3 days in a row in our group is playing. And it's insanely fun when everybody is sitting there writing it out and sweating the same things together. So stop what you're doing now and download the Sleeper app to play in their new over-under game. Have some fun with your friends and make a little bit of money in the process. On your mobile phone, you can join our listener group for Sleeper at sleeper.com/FTNBets, and Sleeper will automatically match your first deposit up to $100. Again, sleeper.com/FTNBets, and you get a $100 match on that first deposit. There are terms and conditions that apply, so see Sleeper's terms of use for those details. Today, we're going to continue with our NFL team betting previews, and we're going to be looking at the Jacksonville Jaguars. We're going to stay in the AFC South for now and take a look at the Jaguars. The Jaguars were number 32 in the league last year in scoring, averaging just 14.9 points per game, the absolute worst in the NFL. They also gave up the 5th most points per game at 26.9. Again, if you're only scoring 14.9 a game and you're giving up 26.9 a game, you can see how you're not going to win many football games. And Jacksonville was not a very good football team last year. They had just 3 wins and 14 losses in their 17 games, although it was an improvement over the year before, where they were 1-15 in 2020. Jeff Radcliffe, our resident projections expert, projects the Jacksonville Jaguars to actually take another step forward again this year. He has them at 6.1 wins, and a lot of the books are pretty much in agreement with the number that Jeff has. The consensus number that we see at most of the sports books out there is 6.5 wins this year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But much like Jeff's number, which is a little below, in order to entitle, the books have this juiced up to plus 110, plus 115. Plus 110 is the number you see on the over for Jacksonville on most sports books out there. The best price you can get them at is plus 115 over on FanDuel. So over 6.5 wins, plus 115 on FanDuel for the Jacksonville Jaguars. The under is what a lot of people still think is more likely, and the books agree. The books have the under juice down to minus 130 is the best price you can get out there. Some books have it minus 135 or minus 140. So minus 130 is the best number for under 6.5 wins. That is the more likely outcome. DraftKings, PointsBet, and MGM have it at that under 6.5 wins. Remember, Jacksonville has to get to 7 wins to cash this, so not an easy feat for the Jacksonville Jaguars to try to accomplish this year. Unibet has this bumped up to 7.5 wins, meaning you would need them to win 8 games in order to cash that. They're very juiced up, though. It's plus 200 to the over there, minus 265 to the under. Obviously, the under more likely, but at minus 265, you're not making any money. If you are a big Jacksonville Jaguar supporter this year, that 7.5 number on Unibet is probably the place that you want to be going and putting some cash on that. Let's see, 6.1 projected wins, 6.5 consensus number in the market. Not going to be very easy to make the playoffs with numbers like that. We spoke about it with a lot of the other teams here. You need 10 wins last year, guaranteed you a playoff spot. 9 wins meant that you had a chance to grab that last wild card spot. A couple teams with 9 wins made it. A couple teams with 9 wins didn't. So even if Jacksonville does get the over and gets up to 7 wins, they're still going to have to come up with at least 2 more wins to be in a conversation. 3 wins to kind of lock themselves up into the playoffs based on what we saw last year.
I don't know. I think it's asking a lot for a team that doesn't have a very high projection here. So I think the best thing to do is just kind of stay away from this. Yes, you can bet them no to make the playoffs, but the no number, the best you're going to get on that is minus 590. So, I mean, you're basically making like $16 per every $100 bet in that situation. Like, you're not going to make money long term by doing stuff like that. Do I think Jacksonville misses the playoffs? Yeah, I do. Do I want to wait, I don't know, 5 months in order to get us, a return on it? Probably not here. So I'm going to be staying away from this one. But minus 590, Bet Rivers Sugar House, best place you can play that. It's as high as minus 650, I think, on DraftKings. So again, minus 590, not a horrible number, but again, you're just not going to make any money betting that way. So let's see. Obviously, if they're not going to win a lot of games this year, some of the next things we're going to talk about, or we usually talk about here, them to win the division, them to win the conference, them to win the Super Bowl. Probably going to be some pretty big numbers, and probably not going to be numbers that we're interested in anyway. And honestly, that's the way it is. You look at this division, and Indianapolis and Tennessee are the clear two best teams in this division, right? So Jacksonville is getting better. They are better than Atlanta, but they're well behind the top two in this division. So even at plus 750, which is the best number in the market for the Jacksonville Jaguars to win the AFC South, I don't really have a lot of conviction. I don't really have a lot of, no desire really even to bet that number. FanDuel, BetMGM, Caesar all have it at plus 750 for the Jags to win the AFC South. The other books that are out there all have it at plus 700. So 7-1 odds for the Jags to win the AFC South. Again, I don't see it happening. If one of Indianapolis or Tennessee falls apart, maybe they get a bunch of injuries, maybe something happens in the locker room, I don't know. Maybe Jacksonville could end up second, and that's still a big maybe there. But with that being said, in order for them to end up first and to win it and to pay this off, you would probably need both of those teams to fall apart. And even then, I couldn't guarantee it, because it's not like Jacksonville is a really, really good team waiting in the wings, just hoping something happens to one guy. You're going to need a series of events that are going to get in here that, could be a problem. So the way I'm looking at it here, I'm not even going to bother with that. And if we're not going to bother with the AFC South, we certainly aren't going to bother with them to win the AFC. Like I said, they're minus 600 to even make the playoffs. So if they do somehow manage to sneak in, it's probably going to be one of the bottom rung spots on the playoff ladder. And if that is the case, I mean, again, do you expect them to come out of the AFC? I don't. 66-1 on BetMGM, 65-1 on DraftKings. Everybody else has it at 50-1 or below. Even at 66-1 or 65-1, it's not enough for me to want to put anything serious behind the Jacksonville Jaguars here. Jacksonville Jaguars to win the Super Bowl. The consensus number out there is 125-1, but you can get it a little bit better on DraftKings. DraftKings has this at plus 13,000, or basically 130-1, which is better than the 125 that almost every other book has it at. So if you're interested in the Jacksonville Jaguars to win the Super Bowl, go over and play it on DraftKings at, 13,000, 130-1. Again, I don't even think they could win the AFC South, let alone the AFC. So winning the Super Bowl is a pipe dream. Even if this number was 200-1, I probably still wouldn't be interested in it. So anyway, there you go for the team stuff here for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's go on and talk about some of the player props here. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting for the Jags. They do have a very young core. They do have a bunch of guys who have come over in the last year or two, and that's really the way that we're looking at it here. So quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, probably the first guy we should talk about. 3,641 yards passing last year, 12 touchdown passes, 17 interceptions. Those numbers are not good and will need to improve. And hopefully they will improve, right? They brought in a couple more weapons for him. Everybody's in the offense for a year. They got rid of Urban Meyer and a disaster that was. So, we'll see what happens here with them. I think everybody knows that Trevor Lawrence is a better quarterback than the numbers showed last year. It's just a matter of putting him in a good system, protecting him, getting him some skill position players, and, giving him a chance to kind of flourish here. So hopefully in year 2, we can see him take that step forward. So let's see. He is 100-1 to win the MVP. 75-1 to 80-1 is kind of the consensus in the market, but Caesars has him at 100-1 plus 10,000 to win the MVP. If you're interested and want to take Trevor Lawrence, think that he's going to bounce back and take the league by storm this year, MVP 100-1 over at Caesars. Not something I'm really looking to bet on. Most passing yards in the league, Trevor Lawrence, 30-1. Basically everywhere but PointsBet has it at 30-1. PointsBet has that at 28-1. But every other book, FanDuel, DraftKings, Caesars, BetMGM, Unibet, SugarHouse, BetRivers, all of those books, you can get him 30-1 most passing yards. Do I think it's a good bet? No, I do not think it's a good bet. Again, last year he threw for 3,600. Yes, they did get him some more weapons. Most passing yards in the league is probably going to be 5,000 or more. We had two guys that did it last year in the 17-game schedule. It would take a massive, basically about a 50% increase here on what he did in 2021 in order to see him get over that 5,000 mark. So not interested in most passing yards there. Passing yards total, though, are kind of interesting to me. And there's a big spread on these numbers at basically the same price here. So FanDuel has 3,800 passing yards for Trevor Lawrence at -112 for the over and the under. DraftKings has 4,000 passing yards for Trevor Lawrence, -110 for the over and the under. And PointsBet is in the middle there at 3,900, juiced to the over a little bit. So I guess they're a little more in line with DraftKings number than they are with the FanDuel number there. So that's an interesting thing to see there. So FanDuel is probably the number that's the outlier if you're looking to play an over. Again, 3,641 yards is what Trevor Lawrence threw for last year. You figure they got him some new receivers this year. He's got another year in an offense. He's got a better coach this year. At least we assume a better coach. Urban Meyer was kind of a disaster there, so I don't think you can do much worse. So I don't think it's crazy to think a healthy Trevor Lawrence can throw for, over 3,800 yards. So if you want to take the over on that, FanDuel -112. Now, remember, a lot of these things do tend to go under, either due to injury or poor play, or, even a guy only missing 2 or 3 games or 1 or 2 games sometimes could be enough for him not to get this. Like, again, we're asking him to step up 150 more yards in the same amount of games he played last year, which I think he can with a little bit better weaponry that he has this year. But, if you miss 2 or 3 games there for Trevor Lawrence, again, he's probably not going to get this number because that would mean that he'd be a guy that was going to throw for, I don't know, like 4,800 yards and take away those, 200, 250 yards a game that he would have thrown for. And now you're right back down to, the 38, 39 level. So again, he has to stay healthy, but if he does stay healthy, I think he can go over that 3,800 yards there. What I like better, though, is, the under at 4,000 yards over on DraftKings. I would have taken the under on this number here at 4,000. At 3,800, I do think you can play the over because that's around, I have him projected, I think about 39 is the number that we have there. So that would put him in the middle of these two numbers. Now, again, you're paying -110, -112 on both sides. So it's not a number I want in middle. You want to pick one side or the other. If you want to bet the over, you go to FanDuel, you get it at 3,800 yards, and you take the over at -112. If you want to bet the under, you're not going to take the under at 3,800 yards on FanDuel, which is where it is at -112 too, because you can get under 4,000 yards on DraftKings for -110. So under DraftKings, 4,000 yards, -110. That's my favorite way to play it. But like I said, if you do like the over, don't play the over at 4,000 yards. Go down to the lower number on FanDuel at 3,800 yards for -110 and play the over there for Trevor Lawrence. Passing touchdowns for Trevor Lawrence, 22.5, over -110 on DraftKings, under -110 on DraftKings. BetMGM has them both at -115. So DraftKings is the best place on both of them there. He only threw for 12 touchdown passes last year. I would expect him to improve on that. But again, the number was so bad last year, and we do expect improvement this year. It's, 20 is probably around where it should be. So maybe it's a little bit higher than it should be here, but not a number that I'm really willing to bet on. If I had to bet on it, I'd take the under. I'd take it at DraftKings at -110. But like I said, I'm not betting on it. Interceptions, 14.5. Last year, he threw 17. You can get this also at -110 on DraftKings to the over and the under. BetMGM has it as well, -115 to the over and the under on Trevor Lawrence interceptions. Again, last year was 17. The number this year is 14.5. I think it's a really good number. I would probably take the under if I had to. I think he'll A, improve, and then B, also if he gets hurt, you wind up with the under anyway for him. So, I like the under more than I like the over here at -110 on his interceptions at 14.5. So as long as he doesn't throw 15 interceptions, you're there. And the guys that throw 15 interceptions tend to be guys that play all 17 games anyway. So, if he's bad and he plays 17 games, I don't think 15 is out of the question, but I think it's more likely that it comes in under. Most passing yards in the league. I do not think Trevor Lawrence throws for the most passing yards in the league. But again, It is 30-1, so I did want to make sure that we mentioned that because I do think it's a number worth mentioning. So now let's move on and talk about the next guy here. Next guy we're going to talk about is going to be Travis Etienne, former college teammate of Trevor Lawrence there. Travis Etienne got hurt beginning of the last year. It wasn't even the beginning of last year. I think it was actually even like the preseason or like maybe even before preseason. It was super, super early. Basically the guy got hurt. He was out for the entire year. It is what it is. That stuff happens. When it does happen, comeback player of the year, always something that could be in the works. So Travis Etienne, comeback player of the year, 40-1 on FanDuel, plus 4,000, best price you could get there. It's plus 3,300, 33-1 on Sugar House Bet Rivers Unibet, 30-1 on PointsBet and MGM. So FanDuel, comeback player of the year, Travis Etienne, 40-1 plus 4,000, best price if you want to get into it there. Most rushing yards in the league, Travis Etienne, 100-1 on DraftKings. He's only 50-1 at most of the other books out there. So if you want to throw some money on this on DraftKings, even if it's $10, at 100-1, $10 is going to be a nice payout for you. It's going to win you $1,000. So if you want to throw $10 on Travis Etienne to lead the league in rushing, that's not going to be crazy. Remember, this guy does have home run speed. We watched it in Clemson. Let's say he breaks a couple of these for, 70, 80 yards, and then they give him a decent amount of volume. I mean, James Robinson last year only averaged about 12 carries per game. What if they win a few more games this year? What if Etienne is a bigger piece? Maybe he gets 15, 16 carries. Again, is it likely? Do I think he's going to beat guys like Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry or even like a Christian McCaffrey or something? No, I don't think he's going to beat any of those guys. But at 100-1, like I said, it's worth $10, right? It's like $10 into 1,000. There's not many things that I think are not worth betting a $10 bet on to win 1,000. And this is one that could actually happen, right? Like, Travis Etienne has one of those games where he breaks two long runs and rushes for 240, 250 yards. There's a chance he can get to 1,500-ish. And maybe if a guy or two gets hurt, one or two guys underperform, like I said, is it likely? No. But again, it's 100-1. So it's not supposed to be likely. It's supposed to be something, though, that you just think is undervalued. And like I said, most of the other books have this at 50-1. So the fact you can get it at 100-1 on DraftKings might be worth using one of those free $10 bets you got lying around in your account or something. Let's see, next number. Some interesting numbers here that'll be kind of fun. So James Robinson last year only played 14 games for this team, rushed for 767 yards. Travis Etienne, his over, minus 115 over and under on BetMGM, 705 yards. So if you think Travis Etienne is going to be like the bell cow back for this team this year, or even just step into the James Robinson role, I don't think 705 is a crazy number. Again, does he have to stay healthy? Yeah, but that is the same thing with every one of these guys. They have to stay healthy to get over this number. That number just feels a little low to me at 705 yards. So I like the over on the rushing yards for Travis Etienne. And like I said, right now, the best number I could find is 705 yards to go over. And that is at BetMGM at minus 115. So I think that's one that we can bet on there. Rushing and receiving, 1,025 yards, minus 135 to the over at BetMGM. And this is one of those things that I was talking about, right? Like James Robinson, 14 games last year, 989 yards. Travis Etienne, 1,025 yards this year. So he's only like 35 yards above where James Robinson was last year. I think Etienne is a better running back, or at least a more explosive running back who has a little bit more upside there. And James Robinson played 14 games last year. So if Etienne could play 17 games, he's probably going to go over this number too. Now, the number that I really like, though, like I said, is the rushing yard. So I took the rushing yard over. But I don't mind if you want to do rushing and receiving over too. The reason I went rushing yard over is that was paying minus 115 for the over at BetMGM. The rushing plus receiving yards over 1,025. That's minus 135 payout on BetMGM. So obviously not as good a return there. Rushing touchdowns for Travis Etienne, 5.5 over or under minus 115. James Robinson did have 8 rushing touchdowns for this team last year. What I don't know, and what I don't think anybody knows, despite what somebody might try to tell you at this point in time, is whether or not they would use Travis Etienne down near the goal line. Now, again, they may do a lot of that, shotgun, spread him out kind of stuff with him as the running back in there. They did a bunch of that stuff in college when those two were at Clemson. So, some of that might be something that they put into the, into the old playbook here. But I don't really know if I feel like Travis Etienne is going to be that back. Maybe they do have a bigger bruiser guy that they want to put in down there, kind of save him a little bit. And if they do, that could limit the touchdowns. So I didn't want to play the touchdowns there with him. Although, again, it's the same minus 115 over and under at that 5.5 number. For me, the rushing yards were the way I wanted to attack it. So, again, stayed away from rushing TDs, stayed away from rushing plus receiving because of the payout. Went with rushing yards over 705, minus 115 BetMGM for Travis Etienne. Last guy we're going to talk about here is the big free agent acquisition that they spent a bunch of money on at wide receiver, and that is former Arizona Cardinal Christian Kirk. 69.5 receptions, over plus 100, under minus 130. So it doesn't look like the betting public out there thinks that Christian Kirk is going to be the answer to the number one wide receiver situation in Jacksonville. And frankly, this is one of the weird situations that I talk about. You know, we talk a lot of times about vacated targets, right? And guys that, oh, well, he's got a bigger chance this year because the wide receiver 1 retired and the wide receiver 2 switched teams and this happened or that happened. The wide receiver 1 last year for this Jacksonville Jaguars team was Marvin Jones. 73 catches, 832 yards. Marvin Jones is back this year. The wide receiver, or I shouldn't say this, the wide receiver 2, but the second wide receiver in terms of production last year for this team was Laviska Shenault, who's also back. 63 catches, 629 yards. The guys that Christian Kirk is replacing, remember, DJ Shark was hurt early on in that year. So again, he didn't really do much for this team. He was banged up when he did come back and play. So it was not a typical year out of DJ Shark. The other guys that were really like up there, like Laquan Treadwell, Tavon Austin, Jamal Agnew, like these are the other guys that are basically the guys that Christian Kirk is stepping into, you know, the roles that a lot of those guys were playing last year. None of those guys really had more than like 20 or 30 catches. Like you could add all those guys up and it's probably about 70 catches, right? So, you know, really, I just don't see, you know, I mean, is Christian Kirk going to take away from Marvin Jones? Is Laviska Shenault going to really take a back seat and not be a part of this offense? I mean, that's an explosive young player that they have here too. There's a lot of mouths to feed, and there's nothing that tells me that this guy's going to be the number one target hog, you know, 23-24% target share. Like, I don't see that. I know he was a guy they spent a lot of money on, and I expect him to play a lot here on this team. And I do expect him to actually put up some numbers, but, you know, over 70 receptions, I don't know. Same thing with 5.5 touchdowns, right? Like there were, I think, 60 guys in the league last year that caught more than 5 receiving touchdown passes. So you're telling me that he's one of the top, I don't know, 50 pass catchers in the league right now? Like, maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but it's not really worth it at minus 110 to the over. The under is actually minus 120. So even the bettors are thinking it's more likely that he goes under 5.5 than over. Receiving yards, 805 on FanDuel is the low number there. So if you want to play an over, you want to be on FanDuel for Christian Kirk receiving yards. 800.5 FanDuel over is minus 112. If you want to play the under, DraftKings has this number at 825.5 minus 115. So I'd rather be under the higher number at 825.5. Give up a little bit more in the basis points, 3 basis points, nothing crazy. Minus 115 instead of the under 800.5 minus 112 that you can find on FanDuel. So again, over on FanDuel, 800.5 minus 112. Under on DraftKings, minus 115 at 825 yards. Those are the best prices you can get on Christian Kirk. For me, I want to be on DraftKings on the under here. Remember, the top 2 wide receivers last year, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, both of those guys back. The guys that are gone, the number of targets that they're replacing, it's not really a great number. They would have to take a major step forward in both the efficiency of their passing game and the volume of their passing game in order to really support all these guys at those same levels. Or Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault, they're going to have to take major steps back, which again, could happen as well. But I just don't feel that confident enough to put a bunch of money on Christian Kirk. So there you go. That wraps it up for the Jacksonville Jaguars team betting preview here today. We're going to do the Atlanta Falcons next week. That'll be the last team in the AFC South. That'll wrap up the AFC South for us. Then we'll have the East done. We'll have the South done. Then we'll probably head out to the West to do the AFC and NFC West next. So there you go. That wraps it up for us here at the FTNBets Cast, sponsored by our good friends over at Sleeper. Good luck today, everybody.
Live from the new sports betting capital of the world.
You might be from Texas, but I'm from New Jersey.